out this door and to the right, to the end of the corridor, and then left. The emergency exit, the fire stairs, is to the right and at the end of the corridor. I hope that you can stay with us and enjoy some lunch. And now we'll get on with the program. First of all, just to put things in context and just for a bit of light relief, this is how our users view ebook. I hope you can read that. And not like this. And hopefully this is not an accurate picture of how publishers see them. I'm sure that's not the truth. Okay, so we'll move into the presentations. The first presentation is from Gillian Hallam, Dr Gillian Hallam, who is an Adjunct Professor in the Library and Information Science discipline at Queensland University of Technology. Her teaching experience, which has been recognised through a number of teaching and learning awards, encompasses the area of information organisation, information retrieval, reference and information services, professional practice, law librarianship, and evidence-based library and information practice. Dr Hallam is the author of a briefing paper on eTextbooks and third-party e-learning products that was published a couple of years ago. And so I'd like to invite Gillian to set the context for today by giving her presentation. So welcome, Gillian.
Just give technology a minute. Have I done something wrong here? I've stopped the screen sharing. So. Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, so that should be right to go. If you're an online participant, would you mind just muting, making sure that your sound is muted? Thank you.
Naming and shaming, I don't know. Right. Okay, well, good morning, everybody, both here in the room and those of you sort of externally listening through the web. It's great to be here and have this opportunity to sort of speak with you all and to reflect, I suppose, on some of the work that I actually did, as Alison said, a couple of years ago now. The briefing paper, it was really the first major study of eTextbook, the eTextbook scene, if you like, that was undertaken here in Australia. It was commissioned by QULOC, and they wanted the study to be done in a fairly sort of fast, condensed way. So rather than using the normal strategies of using members of QULOC to do it, they actually sort of outsourced the work to do. And so it was a very intense 6 weeks, in fact, just working on this. The focus of the report is very much on industry trends, who the major players were, very much around current research policy and practice, what was happening across the academic environment in Australia at that time. We took a number of different stakeholder perspectives, so looking really at the implications of eTextbooks for academics, for libraries, for students, for campus bookshops, for e-learning services, all of the different areas there. The way we went about it, we had an environmental scan to see what was being written about eTextbooks, not only in Australia but across the world. And then we had a series, probably about 20 or 30 semi-structured interviews with different stakeholders as well. So it's a very rich process to find out what was going on. So I suppose 2012, that's actually 3 years ago, but I'd probably argue that there's not been gigantic leaps forward over those 3 years. So it's going to be very interesting for me today to see what's been coming out of practice, in fact, over the different universities. So one of the key aspects of what we were looking at that stage was that this quote here, developments in digital textbooks and e-learning products are fostering a paradigm shift that is disrupting and decentralizing standard publishing models. So this interplay with publishers is really a very key aspect of the e-textbook scene. So the stimuli for the study way back in 2012 was very around the developments that were happening in online learning. And Alison mentioned this, and this is obviously progressing, still going on. A rapid increase in the uptake of digital devices, so iPads, tablets, smartphones. The acceptance of ebooks. All right, that's been certainly in academic libraries a rapid increase in terms of the number of ebooks available to staff and students, but also then the changing expectations as a result about access to academic content, different ways of doing it in a very mobile population, as we saw in the sort of the cartoons about being on the train and learning as you do things. My daughter is studying her master's in education, and she does all of her academic reading running at the gym. Okay, so her tablet is in front of her and she's running and she's absorbing all of this information. And she asked me about it. Then the emergence of new publishing models. So that's happening as well, and that is continuing to change and develop over time. So the impact of e-textbooks covers a very wide area. The original combination of the publisher speaking to the academic, selling the textbook, and then the student that sort of like triangle of activity is expanded, it sort of explodes outwards with e-textbooks in terms of the implications across the university as a whole. So as you can see here, yes, it naturally impacts on library acquisitions, on purchasing, on licensing, but also in the e-learning environments of academic content management. So you've got your e-learning people involved, the virtual learning environments. It impacts on curriculum development in terms of how academics are going to use digital materials through their e-textbooks, and therefore implications directly on teaching and learning, on pedagogy. There are sort of concerns as well around student assessment, how that sort of can change and be done differently using some of these e-textbooks. And therefore, across the board, policy at the university level is going to have its own implications about how it's managed within the organisation. So the stakeholders, as we found in the study that we did in 2012, is such a broad range of stakeholders. It's not that sort of triumvirate of the academic, the student and the publisher. It affects all of these, as you can see on the screen there, all the different stakeholders. And of course, even the wider community. I mean, if you've got print textbooks on the shelf, members of the community can come into the library and take them off the shelf and have a look at them. But if it's licensed to a student as a single sort of single access license key or whatever it is, that excludes the community in terms of their access to information as well. So there's more there. So just for today, just to set the scene really, it's the brief was to try and get everybody on the same page, no pun intended. So what is a textbook? So what do we all understand as textbooks to start with? Okay, so we have ebooks, obviously, but so how do they differ then from e-textbooks? All right, so a textbook, as we know it, generally supports the study of a finite subject area. It's tailored to a specific area of disciplines. Far more common, shall we say, in the sciences rather than necessarily in the humanities. There's not very often pure textbooks. I mean, even in library science, there are some textbooks, but I've never actually prescribed a textbook for any of the courses that I've been involved in. We expect a richer sort of environment of accessing content from many different sources rather than a single area. But basically, it's a sequence of content that presents all of the current knowledge on a topic. It's used by lecturers to have further reading, to expand on topics where there's not enough time in the semester to do so to enrich the materials, and then to further explanatory material for students to enrich their understanding of a topic. So as a textbook, obviously, it started out as text. Then in the 1980s, it became a little bit more visual, with illustrations and some photos and graphics. Then I'm sure you can all remember this, the sort of textbooks that had CD-ROMs in the back, and this sort of caused problems with all the electronic equipment, etc., sort of security measures in the library. And then, of course, that then evolved to websites, that you could access a website for further materials as well. But of course, now in this century, then the impact of online education and distance learning, learning management systems, all those things are changing, evolving even further, if you like. So certainly, and I'm sure the publishers would agree, that the textbooks have increased in size, increased in price, and also there's been, I suppose, a push to have more frequent editions of textbooks as well, because that's part of the revenue stream for academics, for publishers, academic publishers rather. So the price, a lot of the studies that have been done on eTextbooks emanate from the United States, and they have a far more I suppose, concerns around the pricing of textbooks. Textbooks are actually much more expensive in the United States than they are even in this country, and they seem to be expensive enough here. There was a court case recently where a Korean student was importing all of the textbooks because he could buy them cheaply in Korea, and then sort of he had his business to on-sell. But of course the publishers took him to court and made sure that that was not going to be a case for the future. So very much a cartel around distribution of textbooks in the US. So therefore an e-textbook, to get to that area, what we might understand there. Again, it's been evolving. So it started out as I suppose you could say, it was an e-textbook, those ones with the CD-ROM at the back, or supplementary digital material, so sort of a hybrid type of model. And then the old PDFs, okay, let's just digitize, just make a PDF and we'll call that a digital textbook. But of course it's a very flat sort of file that you can't do very much with. That then has morphed, of course, into enhanced digital textbooks, so which can be delivered online as well in a variety of ebook formats. And of course, that goes way beyond being just a replica of a print textbook. Beyond that, again, are these proprietary publishers' solutions, which are looking at a whole platform, a learning platform, which, yes, an e-textbook is part of it, but there's lots of extensions beyond that to make it even a richer resource again. So the format, as you can see, will have changed over that time. The PDF ones were like page fidelity. What you see is what you get. So whether you have the text or the E, they look basically the same. Reflowable, that's of course when XML comes in, and they're much more dynamic. So it depends on the device that you're using, how the page layout, that all changes and flows in a different way. So there are standards, obviously, for those, for like the EPUB and EPUB 3. But that allows sort of different options for visually impaired users, for example. So there's lots more flexibility around those, but you'll hear far more about that later on. But then there's what are now described as e-textbooks that are media-rich, integrated, interactive, and beyond. So these are really through these third-party platforms, focusing very much on interactivity. So the student engaging in different learning activities through the resources, using audio, video, 3D models, etc., that you can have interactive formulas, that you can change components of a formula and change the whole science around what's happening there. Students can obviously then use it for making annotations or sharing notes, so sharing across the platform, developing collaborative learning strategies, so rather than just the student working with the textbook. So the assessment tools can also be integrated into the resource as well. So digital rights management is obviously a key issue with these things, and also what is described as a borrower and how they are then restricted. Okay, access is restricted to people with the key to these tools. So it's not quite so free to air. And so e-learning solutions come as I say, a web-based platform. In the United States, there's been certainly a push by some of the publishers to sell the e-learning platforms to the parents of students, to say your son, your daughter will only succeed if they have, you know, this resource. So the whole market is changing in that environment. So it's not just the universities, but also sort of a private market for them as well. So there are opportunities, if you like, for these web-based portals. The students have the opportunity to really immerse themselves in the content, and as I mentioned, to engage in constructive learning, collaborative learning with other students. It allows teachers to consider the way that they do undertake the assessment activities, to monitor student progress, so learner analytics coming into the whole thing. These adaptable learning paths. So if a student undertakes a quiz or a test, then based on the outcome of the learning that they present, the pathway can change. So that if they feel the system believes, the analytics believe that there's further work to be done on a certain aspect, extra learning materials can be presented around the area where there's actual student learning needs. So very much, much more flexible in terms of that. So they can be used either as standalone products, but also then linked to other digital textbooks. The key aspect literally is the technologies, the activation keys that are related to these that allow access. So if a student has a unique key, it can't be then sort of further distributed. It's sort of locked in. So there are major implications in terms of access. What we shouldn't overlook is the big push as well for open educational resources and open textbooks. The whole digital environment allows academics to create their own content or to collaborate with other academics to create that. So you're probably all familiar with open access. So basically it's a textbook that is created from the grassroots by academics to work that. The idea is that it's open content, so anybody can sort of use it through Creative Commons licensing, adapt it, change it, make it relevant to your immediate context. The idea is that this will obviously considerably reduce the cost of textbooks, but also change that learning dynamic in terms of the quality of information that the students can have access to. So you can imagine, say, in the area of library science, the collaboration that could happen across the different universities to have a key textbook that is developed, even with, say, ALIA as the sponsor of the actual development of that. So they're industry specific. You're not relying on outside publishers. The dynamics can change very, very strongly in that area. So it can be kept up to date. Obviously, there's no finite situation. It's an ongoing, evolving product. And certainly in the United States, again, the business models for open textbooks is quite interesting. There's institutional funding where a university will actually say, we'd like to get into this market and to encourage our academics to create their own materials. There's grant funding, so you can apply for research grants to do it. A lot of philanthropy. So in some situations, you know, we don't have the same philanthropic push over here, but there have been examples of where a philanthropist has just put $10 million on the table to say, okay, develop an open textbook for my discipline area. That's what I'd like to see happen. And then also there's been some crowdfunding. So again, quite different publishing options to the traditional commercial publishers that we're familiar with. So Apple inevitably is in the game with iBooks Author. So they've got a tool for those that are using the iOS environment. So Apple's interest in education is immense. They've sold more than 8 million iPads into schools and universities across the world. And there are now, 3 years ago, there were 20,000 educational apps, and now there's 75,000 educational apps. So a lot happening in that space. Of course, there's iTunes U, and they're already up to 1 billion downloads for materials that are distributed that way. So iBooks Author is a tool that can be used working with all of the other Apple products that are available. The main push is that they are freely available, but if an author does want to make money from it, then there is an option as well that they can publish through the iBook store. But as it points out there, you actually need to have a US tax ID to do that. And so it's very much America focused rather than international. And then there's an agency fee charged by Apple. In recent weeks, I think it was around February, a new Kindle textbook creator was launched as well. So the other side of the spectrum is being covered there. So it's kind of like iBooks Author, but uses PDFs of text as a starting point, as it says. So that's another area to explore. But Glyn Davis at the University of Melbourne has been encouraging academics to explore this area. And so that quote there is basically sort of saying that academics can fashion their own textbooks. And I don't think this is new. Again, the contrast, I think Australian academics are more, less homogenous, shall we say. The academic freedom might be a little bit stronger over here than in the United States. Some of the trials that have happened in the US, there was one state where all students across the whole state doing Psychology 101 had the same textbook. Now, the chances of that happening between two lecturers within one university doing Psychology 101 is highly unlikely. So the situation is quite different, I think, over there from over here. So there is much more encouragement for that academic freedom, if you want to call it that, to create your own resources. So that's an interesting area to be working in. There are plenty of advantages for eTextbooks, so your portability of access, availability, currency, etc. All of those, many advantages. But also there are some disadvantages, okay, which is normally just the flip side. What's good for some people is bad for the others, and so that all comes in. I think some of the important areas are towards the bottom there, sort of user experiences, user expectations. So to try and understand we have such a diverse range of students these days. So it's not one size fits all. So how to best manage that diversity of the student group. Pedagogy as well, how to get the best learning outcomes from the use of these resources as well. The personal identity bit, that's an interesting one, sort of the idea that especially somebody moving into sort of an academic environment or a professional environment, the things they've studied at university are on their bookcase. They've got that as, this is the learning journey I've travelled. But digital is invisible. So therefore, how do you then, I suppose, morph that into, understanding who you are as a professional in that context? Just a different one. So very importantly, I think it's not about using electronic text in the same way as print. It's actually then sort of how can you change the reading experience, change the learning experience of the learner to maximize the opportunities which digital text can actually do. So certainly there's a change through mobile devices and the digital resources in what might be achievable. The way that eTextbooks can then stimulate collaboration, so students sharing and reflecting on their learning, lecturers being able to monitor the progress of their students more closely to see what is being learnt and where there are problems with the learning, but then also sort of that sort of underneath, behind the scenes activity of what learning analytics can achieve as well. So this very much involves a shift from assessing the outcomes of learning to guiding the learning process. And for some academics, that is not necessarily the way they think. It depends on their own philosophy of teaching and learning. One of the big problems is at the moment that we actually don't have a lot of evidence about the outcomes from e-learning, online learning and things like that. So there's a lot of research that is being undertaken at the moment to see how learning does change through interaction with these types of resources. But the primary goals, I believe, should be, as it states here, to achieve a richer student experience, to enable students to engage in learning in a different way, to understand their own learning. Also to offer academic staff a more rewarding teaching experience. The challenges for academic staff is really the push towards the demand for research output. And sort of teaching can become almost like the second-class citizen. So how to engage them, how to have innovative pedagogies, innovative teaching actually rewarded, recognised and rewarded within the university environment as well. And very much to reduce the cost. But what we're probably finding is shifting the cost across to different parties within the area rather than necessarily reducing it. It was very much recognised that there's a number of barriers to adoption, and there I would argue that 3 years since doing the study for QULOC, there hasn't been an immense amount of progress. There's been some, but not quantum leaps, I don't think. So there's some academic resistance to technology. They actually like print, and we were just talking about this earlier. Lots of us still enjoy. There's a lot of research coming out to say that learning is actually more effective through the print medium than it is through digital media. So those type of issues still need to be explored in more detail. So understanding how to best utilise those resources through the pedagogy. Digital media literacies. Do all our academic staff have the right level of digital media literacies to productively do what they'd like to do in those areas? What about skills development? What's the library's role in developing the skills not only of our students but also then of our of the academic staff as well? And of course, student preference. Not everybody wants to live online all the time. There's a PhD study happening at the moment at Bond University, which is really looking at the factors on the academic side for actual lecturers. What is going to encourage the uptake? What are the barriers? So Deb's work is just at its beginning stages, so it's going to take a couple more years or so before we get some outputs. But it's going to be very interesting, I think, to see what the academics are seeing as being the barriers or the motivating factors. So that really just is a short, snappy introduction into sort of what we've covered over the last 3 years or so. We've got lots of open shelves, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the program today to sort of put some information onto the bookshelf to find out what's going on and to learn from you, again, what's happening in real practice within academic libraries at the current stage. So that's really as far as I'll go on the thing.
Would you like to join me in thanking Gillian?